So here's what I thought we'd do today. We're gonna really want to create a dialogue. That's really our goal. Pass that down, please. Just about technology and what that looks like in this building, and how that's, because it's so much, a part of who we are. And so I thought we'd start by each one of us. Each one of us has a role in learning, right? And as a part of our introduction, a way to make sure we know who's at the table, I thought what we might do is I might ask each one of us to reflect on our why. Right? We always start, the people who are in this building know that what we do is one of the things we always do is we start with our why. Why are we here? Why did we choose to be a part of the experience that we chose to be a part of? Because that's one of the special things about this building is we do choose to be a part of this. And so as you think about why you've chosen to be a part of our educational community, because everyone here is a part of this educational community, what I'd like for you to think is I'd like for you to think about your why. I've given you a note card to maybe jot some things down, and we're going to complete this activity. This activity is going to come back and complete us at the end, and we'll kind of see what that looks like. I'd like for you to think about in your role as a learner, facilitator, support individual, administration, whatever your role is, what's the role of technology in facilitating learning? And I'd like for you to jot just some notes down on your note card. Because what we're going to do, and I'm just going to be transparent, what we're going to do is we're going to get a sense of what's the thought of the room. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take the cards, I'm going to give them to Mr. Greenwell, he's going to put them in a Wordle, and we're going to create a word cloud. So that when we get done, we're going to reflect back on knowing that each of us has a different perspective, knowing each of us has a different role, we're going to reflect back on, did our work today and how does our work in the future reflect back on our why? Why are we here? Why do we do what we do? Right? So I'll just give you an example. My why, what I'm going to put down on this paper, my why is I take 14-year-olds and I turn them into adults. Focusing on skills. Right? And I need to think about how does technology impact that. I'm going to give you I'm going to say 3 to 5 minutes to do that activity. And when you're done, if you'll just give your cards to Mr. Greenwell, then he can put them in the Wordle for us. You don't have to.
Sign your way.
think that's it.
Thanks, Chip.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so as we, and we'll come back to that in a little bit, but as we get started, let's go ahead and make sure everybody knows who's in the room so that we can know who we have. So, Dr. Berry, do you mind introducing yourself?
And I'm very pleased to be here, so I was hoping you would have the students introduce themselves.
I will.
I'm Marlon Berry. I work at the central office.
Thank you.
I'm Debbie Skinner. I'm Systems Manager with Technology. I also work at the central office.
I'm Andy Mays. I'm Chief Information Officer for the district. I also work at central office, and my major charge is the management of the technology programs for the district.
I'm Dr. Arbuckle.
Mark Morley, teach physics and AP physics, and I was actually in similar roles before becoming a teacher. So I was in IT for the law school and for the University of Arkansas, where Mr. Mays and I worked together before that.
I'm Kylie Corbett, and I'm the computer science teacher here at NTech, so I deal with tech all the time, every single day on a regular basis, so I'm really glad to be here. So some facts on me, yeah.
All right, I'm Kent Woodard. I'm the chemistry and AP chemistry facilitator. Yep.
And one of our department chairs.
Oh, yes.
Or building leadership.
Yeah, building leadership team, yes.
Am I going to?
Yes, dear.
Okay. I'm Natalie Collins. I go here.
What year?
What was that?
What year?
I'm a junior.
Junior.
I'm Sidra Nadeem. I'm a senior.
I'm Austin Abercrombie. I'm a junior as well.
I'm Andrew Brown. I'm a junior here as well.
I'm Bethany Dowd, and I'm also a junior.
And how many of you are doing NLAC 2? Okay, 2 of you. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and follow the agenda, and we have several topics there that we wanted to discuss, and I didn't put them in any, just the order you sent them to me, actually. So let's kind of talk about your thoughts on, I know you and I have had lots of conversation about these kinds of things, and I told you, we wanted to bring learners into that conversation. And so that's why these guys are here, and facilitators, because, they're the, as you and I have talked about, they're the ones who are on the receiving end of any kind of decisions that are made or whatnot. So where would you like to start?
Well, thank you first, Dr. Arbuckle, for inviting us to come and speak to a leadership group of your students and facilitators. I'm in my third year here, and this is really the first type of conversation in this format that we've had at this school, so I'm really grateful for the opportunity. The things I came here to discuss kind of were precipitated from a conversation that Dr. Arbuckle and I have had over the past year about changes that were made to configurations on your MacBook devices in the classroom. That was kind of the genesis of this conversation, right? So you and I have talked that back and forth several times, and kind of tried to help each other understand our perspectives and where we have commonality, and there's a great deal of that commonality, and also areas where there may be perceptions that decisions are being made, changes are being made in a vacuum over at the central office that negatively impact your learning environment. And so, the first security issue that we discussed was the implementation of a user-level account on those MacBook Pros this year that does not have permission to install software. And
Talking about the admin.
Talking about users not having admin
Right,
rights, which
right.
is the first time that users have not had admin rights at NewTek, as I understand it.
Right.
So, naturally, that's going to be a difficult, touchy issue. We tried to communicate through leadership and who we could at the time. That decision was made during the summer. I don't know if you all are aware, but every summer, the tech team has to bring a large number of people over to re-image and reconfigure the software on every single device that's in this school. So it's very labor intensive, and we end up having to do that work and then come back throughout the year and fix equipment that has been misconfigured and items removed or software installed that brings vulnerabilities to the network in this school. which is a part of a district network that consists of 23 schools. So we are here an ecosystem. You're part of a greater ecosystem that has to be managed. So one of the first things we did, and as I discuss these security measures, you're going to see we're kind of layering things in incrementally to try to lessen the blow as much as we can. I know a change from being able to install software to not is a big change. I also know that our other 22 schools in the district have no ability to install software. And in fact, those machines, up until my arrival and involvement with Debbie in working to reconfigure our district network, they would re-image every night. So anything you put on that computer anywhere in the district would be gone by the next morning. You would have to reinstall any software, any files you stored on the desktop would be gone, etc. So that is kind of the overall district ecosystem, and we've had this exception here at NTech where students are able to install anything and everything they want. And so we're trying to find a good common middle ground that helps facilitate learning without locking out access to tools that you need. And the way that we do that is by implementing centralized management of devices. You may not be aware, but we have over 20,000 devices in this district and 8 technicians to manage those devices. So you can imagine we're pretty stretched in terms of trying to get out and put hands on machines. So what we've implemented are remote management systems, and as part of that, the first step is to lock out the admin rights for the individual user so that we can remotely control and configure those devices, and ultimately push out software automatically to an entire classroom or lab or school at a time. So that change was made, and obviously that's a difficult one. I would use the analogy of putting toothpaste back into a tube, right? When you've got a group of users who are accustomed to having a certain level of access, and that's pared back, that's never going to be appreciated. And I understand that causes implications in the classroom. It creates difficulties when students want to explore a piece of software and they can't do it on the spot. But unfortunately, we're regulated by guidelines that, in fact, enforce us restricting that level of access. So as I go through this, one of the things that I want to impart is that we know as a technology team that we exist as a customer service unit to facilitate learning in every classroom across the district in the best way that we can. So that is truly the attitude that we come to our work with. However, there are other influences at force that drive us to make decisions that are not necessarily popular. Those exist at the federal, state, and local level, and these are requirements that we have to adhere to in order to be in compliance to receive federal funding. We receive.
Can we discuss a little bit?
Sure. You got something you want to?
Well, no. I just think. So a couple of things to get the conversation started, because you and I have had this conversation about SIPA before. I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I'll get into that. And
so, and you've talked to me about that probably 2 or 3 times, and so I was interested. I thought, I'm just going to go read it, right? And there's a lot in there. One of the things, and there's things in there about, and I kind of I've talked to these guys before about our duty as a school district and as a school, making sure they're safe, those kind of things. One thing I'm going to throw out there that I think at least does open the door for the conversation is, I think, and I'm probably not going to quote it exactly right, but Section 3, subsection F of SIPA says that a school district, an LEA can choose to suspend that for educational purposes, which I thought was really interesting. And it's very clear. I mean, it refers back to paragraph 1, and it talks about, all the different organizations within all the different levels within a school. It even says an administrator. So I don't want to set the the discussion group up for, well, there's this federal law that can't be dealt with, because in essence, there is a window open in there,
No.
in that subsection, that allows a school district, LEA administrator to basically turn that off, thinking about the filtering and the blocking and all that, if there's some educational reason to do that.
If you do not wish to receive federal funds.
That's not the way I
First
read
off-
it, though.
Okay, well,
So-
we don't have that text in front of us, so I'm not going to
No,
go
I
off
meant to
that.
print it off
I'll just
my
go off my
computer.
15 years of knowledge of SIPA and my work with attorneys in multiple districts to interpret the terms of SIPA and what can and cannot be waived. So there is no choice to not participate and take federal funding.
Okay, all right. And that'll be one of those things that you and I
was my
can.
comment that I was referring to next, in that if we are not in compliance with these regulations, which I was going to get into the layers of, if you'll allow me, and explain what each requires, there's federal funding involved that is a key component of operation of our district. And
What?
that-
And I get all that. What I want to do is I want to make sure that everybody's able to have the voice, right? So I mean.
Okay, I'm sorry, you asked me to address my topics.
Well, I know, in a discussion format,
Can I
right?
just ask,
Okay.
can I just interject for a second? Do they know what SIPA is? Do the
That
students
was
know
the
what SIPA
next
is?
thing I would explain.
Are
Well,
you-
let's ask them.
Are you familiar?
What do you guys, let's do this in a need to knows kind of, I mean, you guys know that, right? So when you guys hear this piece, what Dr. or what Mr. Mays is talking about around, the federal guidelines and keeping you guys safe. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? An obligation that we have as a school district to keep kids safe from obscene material, those kind of bad things on the internet. They are bad things, right? What are you guys thinking at this point?
I kind of think that, like, yes, there is a lot of stuff out there that does need to be blocked, because there's a lot of bad stuff on the internet. Like, just keeping it real, there's a bunch of bad stuff on the internet. But as of right now, the majority of the stuff that I see blocked on a day-to-day basis, just like going through class, doing things for class, is all things that I could be using in class to better my education. I believe it was like the middle of last year sometime, whenever all of the Chrome extensions were blocked on the Rogers Public Schools Gmail accounts. There were several of those that I used personally on a day-to-day basis, whether it was keeping track of my homework, using Grammarly to correct my writing and make me a better writer. All those resources were just off, and it happened overnight. We came back to school and there was like a mass panic, and everybody was like, what happened? What happened? And then we ended up kind of like figuring out what had happened, and we just kind of had to try and recover from that. And I understand that there are things like that need to be blocked, because there are also some malicious Chrome extensions. I know one of them was called Stylish, which was stealing all your personal information without you knowing it. They got a lawsuit, and that was nice. But there are things like that need to be addressed, and I understand the need for that. But I think that it could be gone about in maybe a better way, to where the public is more informed about it before it happens, I guess. Another thing was like YouTube. I believe, I don't remember whenever it was within the past few months, but every single demonetized YouTube video was blocked by the Rogers Public Schools network filter. A lot of demonetized videos can be bad, whether it's swearing, other things like that. But there are some of them, like Crash Course World History, that are extremely useful, especially whenever we're in a history class, because they cover a very in-depth analysis of specific time periods, and they're like a progression. There's hundreds of episodes of them, and we utilize them throughout the year, all year, both freshman and sophomore year.
Now, when you say demonetize, you're talking about things that you don't have to pay money for.
Basically, what YouTube does is you can monetize a YouTube video, and that means that you can play YouTube-sponsored ads on them to receive money, right? If you have any content within that video that YouTube deems demonetizable, so they'll take away all the ads off your video, basically, from my understanding, what the Rogers Schools filter has done has flagged those demonetized videos and been like, oh, YouTube thinks this is bad, so we're going to think it's bad as well. And it blocks them from being displayed by the Rogers Schools. Is that correct?
That is not entirely correct.
Not entirely, okay.
But your points are valid, and I appreciate the feedback. One of my goals here is to help you understand as a group exactly what we're dealing with. Because the perception right now is Rogers Public Schools is taking this away. Rogers Public Schools is blocking this access. When in fact, we've got layers above us that are taking responsibility for that. And we have mechanisms to override that locally. And that's typically the case. We don't go out and actively seek things to block necessarily. Now, the Chrome extensions is a different issue, and I'm going to allow Mrs. Skinner to address that after I finish here. But there are many of those restrictions that are applied at the state and federal level that are outside of our control initially. And definitely, when there are big changes in YouTube, the filters don't necessarily know how to immediately react. And just as you say, communication helps a lot. Google doesn't communicate those changes. So anything in Google Chrome, anything in Google Classroom, YouTube, any of those tools now owned by Google or Alphabet are subject to change, and we have to be in a reactive mode. And we have to work with others at the state level primarily to find ways around those. Resources that are blocked in YouTube, if you feel that's a legitimate resource, then the mechanism is to speak to your teacher, and they can submit a help request to the technology department, and I will personally review that site to make sure that it's appropriate, and if it is, then we will open it up through the filter. So there is a mechanism for those items to be requested. You have a question?
How long is that process?
It can take more than 5 minutes, so that's where expectations need to kind of be changed, in that if you find a resource, you need to plan ahead and give us some time. We try to turn it in around 3 days tops. Again, you're talking about a school district with over 15,000 students and approximately 2,000 faculty members, so you're not going to be the only or first person coming in with a request, so it won't be immediate.
So one of the experiences, and I don't want to speak for you guys, so if I say something wrong, you guys need to chime in, right? But one of the experiences I think learners have is they're working on their NHD project, they're working on a paper for NWAC, and they find this resource, and I want to use it because I'm working, and then, okay, now then I've got to go through the process, and it's up to, more than 5 minutes, that was what you said, 3 days, 5, whatever it is. And from a learning standpoint, I'm in the process of learning now. Am I kind of saying that?
Yeah, especially with NHD, it's a really long process of researching, and then whenever you keep running into these sources that you can't access.
I know, like, my personal NHD project, I was doing a project on a Formula One racer. A lot of that has to do with sports. ESPN is a huge sports provider, and they had written many, many articles on my specific Formula One driver. And I could not access any of those, so I had to go and find alternatives that were not blocked, and then I had to kind of piece together everything based upon those.
Yeah, and that's part of internet research and resourcing. That's going to be something you're going to run into essentially just about any organization you're at, where you work, where you study. I know it's a lot looser in higher ed because we don't have the restrictions that we have from SIPA that keeps being thrown around, is the Children's Internet Protection Act, and it was put in place in 2000, probably about the time that several of you were born or just about. And it has not really changed dramatically since its inception. And in essence, what SIPA says is that we have to provide active filtering for content on any device that is issued by the school or on any network resource that is given by the school. So if you're on our network or you're using one of our devices, you've got to be filtered by SIP. And so that's an area where we have not been able to fully enforce those requirements. And so, we continue to work to tweak those, basically, to give you access to the things you need. I can't comment on specific articles that you say you wrote months ago, but you're right. Sometimes you have to seek alternate resources, and that's part of internet resourcing. That's a 21st century skill. If it is something that you really need access to do a paper, you're working on a long-term project, you've got more than 5 minutes and usually more than 3 days to request that resource be looked at and unblocked. So that's what I would encourage you to do is be active, speak with your teachers about, hey, I know this is good because so-and-so, and then I'll review it, and if it's legitimate, then we'll open it up.
Yes, I have a couple things to add on multiple things that they've said. So I do teach computer science, and if I filled out a help desk form, I filled out several of those this year, and they've taken much longer than 3 days on some of them with software and programs, because you do have to run those programs, and I understand that. But if I filled one out for everything that was blocked for my classroom, then I feel like I would never stop filling them out sometimes, because so much stuff that we need regarding privacy and big data and the tools that we use for them to program on the internet now, because most of the programs that I need for them we can't download, are blocked. So that's an issue that I personally deal with. I've had Suzanne multiple times in my classroom weekly putting admin passwords in, because I don't have the admin passwords, and I know that she can fill them out for me, but I don't have access to this stuff. And so she's in there helping me, and we've made field trips to the tech office to try to get all that straightened out. So that was something I did want to add. And you mentioned about the resources being something that they'll deal with, and effectively like deciding which ones are true and which ones are valid.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's something that they should be able to learn based on what the resources they find, and I don't know if they're going to be able to effectively say if they're valid or not if they don't have access to them. Am I making sense?
So in essence,
Yes.
what I think I'm hearing you say is we're actually taking away a learning process for kids.
For research on deciding whether or not that resource is valid.
There still seems to be, it feels to me kind of like a perception that this is a subjective filter that we're enforcing. And that's really not the case. We're under the state's filtering.
Yes.
So it's not the technology department that's determined what's blocked and what's not. And there is leeway, like you said, there's some areas that you can give access to that don't go into an open forum of. A lot of content providers open that up so that anybody in the world can provide content on that, for example, a YouTube channel. So we didn't block YouTube based on monetized or not monetized feeds. It was blocked by what Google, because Google bought YouTube.
Yes.
Okay, so it's blocked by what Google determines as safe videos. So Google made that decision. So what Google administration's given us the opportunity to do is your teachers that are classified as, they're in a separate group called classroom teachers basically, but it's a function that Google provides for the educator to override that safe, to say, as a teacher, I'm saying this particular YouTube content is safe, and you can override that. That doesn't come to us, that's your teacher. So you don't have to go through the process of asking for permission to view this YouTube video. Once you've done that, the student, if they're logged in with their RPS 30 account, which automatically, when you go to YouTube, detects who you are by that RPS 30 account, not your personal Google or a brand account that you've created because you have YouTube channels. But if you're in there with your RPS 30 account and you go to the link your teacher has approved, you can now see that. So yes, it could still be Henderson when you're doing random searches for content, but if it's specific curriculum that your instructors have asked that you have access to, they have access to it, and they should be able to provide you access to it.
Debbie, I think the challenge is, and I think that works in a traditional classroom where I as the teacher am controlling the lesson, right? The backbone of a project-based school is that every student is able to run with the content in the project in a way that
Oh, I
is exciting to them,
I do
which now all of a sudden is differentiation squared, cubed,
Sure.
whatever,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
And so I understand what you're saying.
But it's
in
like
essence, what we have though is we're putting the teacher in a position of you're going to do nothing that day but hit click. So I
Oh.
approve, I approve,
Wow.
I approve, I approve, I approve.
I don't know what your answer would be to that. I mean, we can't just go Wild West and say, like taking your kids into a marketplace and go on.
Can I
and
be
say-
honest with you?
Yeah.
Our response is, I'm gonna open up my computer, right? I'm the teacher, I'm gonna open up my computer to my account, and if you find something you wanna use, go approve it. Andrew, if you find something you wanna use, go approve it.
And that's on
Austin,
the
if you-
teacher, right? That's not on.
That's the teacher's responsibility.
That's the teacher, yeah.
That's their decision. And with that,
What
they
I'm
take the
what I'm
risk of
saying
that
though
comes.
is, what we've in essence done is we've forced kids and forced teachers to find a workaround
Gotcha.
around the system,
Yeah, it's
which
really
I know irritates
frustrating.
you because you and I've had that conversation. Just
mean,
about now, maybe I'm wrong, maybe that doesn't irritate you anymore, but it seemed like my perception was the
Well,
last time we talked.
I will say, I think it's pretty reasonable that if a teacher can circumvent a video for a student in a classroom, that's not too onerous. I'll take that position.
Yeah, and I guess so I take it the next step, and not that we have to deal with that here, but why put the teacher in that position, right?
Because
that
they're
becomes
closest
my
to the
question.
classroom and they can open that video on the spot
Because-
versus
yeah.
going through us and help desk.
No, it's even closer to let them do it,
No, here's the deal though. A seventh
right? That's
grade
where I'm
teacher,
going, is it's even closer to let the kids do it.
You know, at Oakdale may say, I don't want my students to see that. So we can, as a district, open that video up. And to answer your question, this is a little bit taking it into a conversational perspective. I'd like to have addressed it when you were talking about the extensions. You know, I'm the one that got the phone call from the classroom teacher who's second grade student. And do some of you have little brothers and sisters? Any of you? No. It would change your perspective a little bit maybe. Because if your second grade brother came home, you know, from a Chromebook exposure to some kind of pornography, you might be a little bit upset about that if it happened at school. And you know how it came in? Dallas Cowboy wallpaper. That's very innocent. I mean, my goodness, why wouldn't you let your kid, are you gonna like regulate who you can be a fan of? So it's just Dallas Cowboy wallpaper that they put on the back of their Chromebook when they log in to do their iReady. They wanted to see their favorite team. Well, guess what? They embedded in that extension some Call Me Now kind of pictures that popped up, and it was pretty offensive. And that's just one of probably 5 phone calls I got in those 2 days. So while we've tried so hard in this district to not be restrictive, we've tried to take, you know, from before, I've been here since, you know, a little bit longer, really only 6 or 7 years. So, but before NTech, I think about the time NTech spun up was probably a year or two after I got here. I was involved in East for years before that, which may or may not be something you're familiar with, but I'm very pro project learning, project-based learning. I mean, I think it's wonderful, totally about giving you all the resources you need. But when you have the rest of the district and the rest of the responsibility, you have to come up with solutions that work for everybody. So I understand where you guys are. You are absolutely in a point and position of making good decisions, and you have to have your education roll in that direction. But like Mr. May said, we're not higher ed. We're K-12, and we have a responsibility to all of our students, to your little sisters or whoever. And so anything we can do to help make this accessible to you, we would love your input. You know, how can we make some area of what you're working on, you know what you're going to do in the next semester for certain types of teaching. Now, I don't know how computer science, because all education classified material on the internet is categorized by one of the top filters in the world. You've heard of Cisco. Well, they make all kinds of things. But that is the filter system that the state chose to purchase. And it updates, I mean, every probably 30 seconds it updates, because as you know, new websites hit every 10 seconds. Somebody in India is throwing up sites that has who knows what on it. So they're constantly running through and trying to determine, is this educational, is this commerce, what is this? So things get blocked sometimes that you might need.
This is a worldwide level database
Yeah,
that's managed to try to keep access to inappropriate content restricted. And that goes back to the essence of the Children's Internet Protection Act and what it requires us to do in order to prevent that. Debbie, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. I think I was just trying to interject a little bit about there's so many layers of this that you may not be aware of, that because you want to get to what you need to get to, it would also open the gate for a lot of other students and some things that they really shouldn't have access to. So, I mean, I think that we can work together but as far as the policy itself, it's not something we can just say, oh, okay, you're right, we're going to turn it off for NTech. We can't.
Unfortunately not.
We can't.
And I've got several pieces of documentation here I'll read briefly after I receive your question to help you understand the layers that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I have a couple of questions. So basically from what you're saying with like the Cisco umbrella, that is like based somewhere down state capitol somewhere?
Yes, sir.
All right. So do you have, I'm guessing that you don't have any control over what that filters out and what that lets stay, correct?
We have control to open particular sites.
Okay.
That's where I said, talk to
The
the
approval
teacher, put in
process,
a help
right.
request, we review the
Okay.
site, and then we can open it up if it's a legitimate resource.
Okay, so now I kind of understand that better. And I'm assuming with Cisco's kind of blocking process, it's all categorized, correct? Like all of the sites are categorized based on like these criteria.
Correct.
And what the state has done is it said, all right, anything that fits in this criteria, this criteria, this criteria, block it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just on like a very surface level. Like
We
not very
choose to
in-depth.
block pornography, and we
Yes.
choose to block gaming.
Like obvious things like
And
that.
those are categories that
Yeah.
are pre-built.
Yes, those are pre-built
And they're
categories.
managed by Cisco and by the state.
And you guys, does the state choose which one of those are automatically blocked, or do you guys choose that?
They have a minimum set that they require to be
Yes,
blocked.
okay.
That includes
Okay.
pornography, child porn,
Yes.
similar things.
So
And then they
something-
have a standard set that they call a SIPA compliance set,
Okay,
which they layer over.
Okay.
Which covers us for that very purpose
Okay.
for sites that have it.
yeah, I'm just wanting to kind of understand the process better so I can like
That's why we're here.
visualize it, yeah. And I appreciate that. So the next thing I kind of want to hear about is like with your like approval request process, is there some type of way that you would be able to more so streamline that, I guess, for lack of a better term, but basically make it to where like facilitators are showed how to do it, which I'm assuming y'all probably know how to do it. You've done it a little bit, correct? But have that more of like a streamlined process to where when we can do it, we can like report that to our facilitators. They check it out and are like, oh, this needs to be fixed. They can send it in, you guys check it, approve it, whatever it needs to be done with it. And it gets back to us. Because I feel like that's a very underutilized method if we are stuck with going down the route for the filtering, which based upon your explanation of SIPA, I'm feeling as if we are kind of locked into that as a district as a whole.
You just like it to be faster?
So would there be
I
a
feel like there
way
could
for
be.
facilitators to prioritize or put those kind of requests in a queue that someone would sit and address?
Yeah, more of like a streamlined process, I guess.
Well, what I will tell you is that, you make progress before you get to
Mhm.
perfection.
Yes.
And just in the last year and a half, we've added the help desk. Prior to that, there was no mechanism for those requests to come through. So we've created a help desk where teachers, facilitators can communicate with us via phone, via email, or on a web form. Either way, it goes to the same system and it drops in a queue where it's evaluated by our technical staff. Again, we have 8 techs that manage 22 schools. So they go in and then they triage requests, and then if it's a filter bypass example, they'll assign it to me, and then I'll have to look at it as well to approve it. Now, it doesn't have to be me. There's Skinner also is authorized to do that, but by its nature, it has to be fairly closely held.
Yes.
I do not know that there is a mechanism that we can push that out directly to facilitators. They have the YouTube option, but for blocking websites, I'm not aware of a facility that we can put that in their hands. And unfortunately, like we said, we're dealing with this Cisco umbrella, which is a filter that is provided and mandated by the state. We have to use those because we use their internet connection, which they pay for us to get access to the outside world. So we are kind of limited by just the logistical nature of how that's set up.
You all heard Debbie's story, right, about the second grader,
Yes.
and do you have any thoughts about what's good for a high school junior versus what's good for a second grader?
Is there a way to like separate the restrictions, like because for high schoolers we have like different
Maturity levels.
Yeah, we have different maturity levels.
That's a very good question.
So is there like, I don't know, I was listening to the conversation, is there a way you can like maybe utilize different filters? So like, because personally also for New Tech, we have laptops 24/7 and we take them home and that's our tool, but for elementary schoolers or middle schoolers, they use Chromebooks, which is restricted to the school, but our research extends further past our school. So is there like a different method?
Now, let me just ask you before I try to address
I was
this.
just going to say, I'll take.
Is that a capability in the filter to have two different student groups? And I have further comments I want to make on that, but just yes or no?
Unequivocally, yes.
Yes. Okay, but part of the challenge for that we have to understand is that when I came into this district, we had an infrastructure that was all out of date, all out of warranty, breaking routinely. We had a network that would go up and down routinely. And so our first focuses were on fixing those issues and rebuilding the network. So in the 2+ years that I've been here, we've been able to replace every piece of network equipment in this district, rewire the entire system. Debbie deserves great credit for increasing capacity at each campus by working contracts with our vendors. What we haven't been able to do in the process of rebuilding that entire network is get students grouped into grade levels and other organizational units where we could attempt to apply different filtering levels. So
If I could
it's a
add just a
possibility.
little bit of complexity here, New Tech would be more difficult to do this at.
Because of the individual.
Because they're on MacBooks and they're not authenticating through the Windows network. So in order to have different levels of security rights, they have to know who you are. So in order to say, New Tech juniors should have access to this level, so maybe we'll give them entertainment or something. Because categorically, again, I'm not sure what you would open categorically. We would probably have to make a group called New Tech or maybe high school or something like that and allow, still it would be an allow process though. And you allow these sites for this group. But once that's done, in order to know that this user is actually a member of that group, it would have to validate your login against something. So, while I said yes, it's doable, there are steps that we would have to
There are a
go
lot
through
of
to get
steps
there.
that we just have not had
And
time
it can be
to address.
doable,
Yeah.
but it's going to require having our MacBooks log into, and we're looking at that already, where they can actually log into the domain, which is the same as the Windows domain. Check that.
Yeah, and that's, that brings up another item that I'd like to get to. If we can kind of, I don't know, if we want to continue to take questions on this one particular issue, if we want to kind of go through.
I think I've got one that.
Sure.
Would it aid things if you had better quality requests? Like I understand the global blacklist and then the whitelist, but if we and why, like fandom creates wikias, and some of them are very high quality, but an opening fandom would be ridiculous. We're not going to do that. And we might get requests to do that. That's the the level, or people want a global kind of access.
Yeah.
Would a higher quality of request be beneficial? If I'm getting requests that you look at and you have a high degree of certainty, yeah, that's limited enough. That's, we've bounded the problem. What is to be opened is what's requested.
So where you would specify a subset of the site.
Right.
Sure, we can look at that as far as an individual page basis,
Right.
but if you're following web development and its evolution since its early days, it used to be a web page was a web page and it was static. Now, a web page can draw content from 60, 80, 150 different servers from
Right.
different sites. So what you end up in that case oftentimes is that even though you open the page, the content won't load.
Yeah.
Can I give you a specific example of that? Yesterday I spent a half hour, and I'm sorry I keep hijacking.
That's okay.
But I can give you some, flesh out some of this so you understand a little better what we look at. I had a teacher at Heritage ask for me to open a local radio station so they could listen to games in the classroom. Well, radio as a content's blocked, but that particular station wasn't blocked. And so I went through the process of seeing whether it had been blocked. I was going to unblock it. It was unblocked. Everything on the page is unblocked, but the one stream that they send their games through goes through a content server that's open generic. It's not, and it can be different every time they stream anything. So we can't, even though I spent a half hour trying to figure out how to unblock it for that particular teacher for a particular set of games at Heritage, I couldn't do it. There wasn't anything I could do to make that stream available to him. So we deal with those levels. That's exactly what he's talking about. Those things that you don't see when you click a button. That, it really opens 50 different sites, and 3 of them are blocked, but it has the content you want.
And that was the second half of my question was persistence of memory. If we do this, how, and we've done the work, we've done some heavy lifting to open some content which is useful and valuable, how can that carry, how long does that carry forward? And what I'm hearing is that's an issue also, that once we've done some heavy lifting, it may or may not remain.
Well, you do have a good point there. Once we open a site, and if we can get the resources on that site opened up so it's effectively usable, then that will stick as far as our local policy. So that will stay in place. However, you do bring up the point that the site itself will change, and it will bring in other content from different servers that we did not know about.
And Umbrella could block it because of that without our knowledge even.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a cat and mouse, as you can imagine, with, as Debbie said, sites going up every 10 seconds. I think it's probably every 100th of a second at this point. It's kind of out of control. But what we do is our best level effort to provide filtering and access through the tools that we have available.
Yeah. So back to your kind of, request thing. So Mr. Morley was talking about having maybe a ranking system or subsets for your request approval form. What are you using currently to do that?
For requests for sites?
Yes.
Help desk.
Help desk, and is that on the Rogers Public School website somewhere?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's listed right on the technology homepage. You can click a link right there that says click here to enter a help request, or you can email helpdesk@parkdsar.net and just tell us what you want.
Okay.
Or you can pick up the phone, if it's your facilitator, you pick up the phone and call and say, I need this resource and I've got a tight timeline, I need it by Monday, can you possibly get that through? That possibly would, I would certainly respond to that and try to get that access.
And I will say that y'all are really good about giving us a timetable on that. So I do appreciate that, because I'll be getting responses, we're trying to do this, but we're working on it, just so you know. So I think my biggest issue is the programs that I need to download on the computers.
Well,
We
the
don't have access
programs
to
that you
downloads.
need to download on the computers, the ideal scenario is those in advance.
As a first-year teacher, that was very difficult for me.
But
I understand that,
but
yeah.
And
as we grow,
Yeah.
You're looking for
But
resources.
as we grow, software you need downloaded, there is a software
and I felt
approval
that
request form. And it's for approval because we need the information about if it's paid, who's paid, what computers it's going on. It's really not about permission so much as I do a final review of the software to make sure that it is legitimate, it's not going to harm our network, it's not laden with viruses or anything like that. That's all I sign off on.
So is that for every computer, every device that we have in the district? Because I know that some software approval that I've had to go to get it approved, to download it on my Macs. You know, RHS or Heritage is using this software.
Well,
So is that just-
you bring up a really good point that I would like to address just in brief. Now, since NT's inception, MacBooks have been the device of choice. And PCs in the rest of the schools, as I told you, they didn't have any choice. And they couldn't install any software. It would get wiped every night. At least we could get software loaded on here for you and it would persist. So that's a plus. Now it's the other side. We've replaced all of the network resources at all of the other schools and upgraded our operating system software to where we have what's called a software center. And any software that has gone through the approval process is available for self-installation on those Windows machines through the software center.
Still limited by licensing, we still.
Yes, of course, we have to make sure that it's available to you legally, but, if it's free, it's not an issue, but we have to.
And that's no joke. Having been on the receiving end of one of licensing problems are no joke for any entity.
No, that could definitely get us into a lot of trouble. But we work really hard to provide the resources that you need, like the Adobe Suite that Debbie just mentioned. Adobe has changed their licensing model seemingly every year that we use their products. And so this year you're seeing the latest and greatest, which is the Creative Cloud. And you have to log in to download and use software. And then you have to log in again to use the software later. And we don't love that. But that is how Adobe forces us to manage those licenses. So pre-planning where you can is ideal. I understand first-year teacher, you're just selecting tools.
And I think that it's also difficult for me because in my classroom, because I teach computer science, everything is changing constantly. So the program that I need one year may be totally different than what I'm going to use, August to January, because this is the latest stuff.
Yep.
So I think that that's kind of what I struggle with.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a computer science teacher too, and in my first year teaching computer science, I was at Bentonville schools, I ran into the same issues. And we just had to go through the help request system, and of course I was in charge of technology, so I could, hey guys, I need this software, which is an advantage I granted. But I still had to go through the same motions of getting that software pushed to the machine because of the restrictions that were on. So I feel you.
Yeah. Comes with the territory.
Yes,
Do
ma'am.
we plan on continuing to use MacBooks here?
It's a great question. I've discussed that with Dr. Arbuckle on multiple occasions. There are several factors involved, most of which, management, and the fact that we have to manage a Windows network of about 17,000 devices and then separately manage a Mac OS network just for this school creates a challenge for us where we have to dedicate additional resources to just manage this school. As I said, we bring in a whole team of people throughout the summer to re-image every machine. Now we're trying to go to remote management where we can just do updates of configuration remotely. That dedicates 2 of our staff right there. We've got eight techs, and 2 of those are dedicated to managing this network. So they do other work too, but it is a big drain. And I've talked to Dr. Arbuckle about the fact that while in the past, Macs excelled in certain areas such as graphic design and video editing over PCs, that's kind of leveled off now. And so now what we're looking at is you can do the same work on each platform. And in fact, we're paying quite a premium for the MacBooks that we put in here versus devices that we could put in, Windows devices we could put in elsewhere that have the same specs, the same capabilities, several additional ports that the newer MacBooks don't have for almost half the cost, or less than half the cost based on the quotes I'm looking at here. So we pay a premium of about $100,000 a year over and above what it would cost to give you Dell machines to give you MacBooks. So that's something we continue to address and discuss. Right now, I have a prototype from Dell of their latest, what they call MacBook Killer. It's $800, and it has the exact same specs as the MacBook that we would bring in next year, which would be MacBook Airs, because the cost of those devices have come down to where they're more comparable. So that's something that you should discuss as a community and say, are we really getting the best that we need out of these MacBooks? Or would it be better for us to have access to install our own approved software and work on a PC environment? That would certainly bring a lot of benefits in terms of financial savings and manageability for us. And that's something that's on the table. Other issues that we need to talk about are, yes, sir?
Well, I was just going to, because Austin and I had a little bit of a conversation, and we knew, I knew that we weren't going to get to everything in an hour, so we may have to plan to come back for a second time. But Austin, I think you and I talked about at some point, there was some thoughts you had around, being able to do your homework in a car or something like that. Tell us about that.
So that was going to be my next question, actually.
Okay.
And I would like to continue this discussion on another day, because we're not going to be able to get to everything. But with all Windows-based machines, would we be required to log into the Rogers Public Schools network every single time we wanted to access our laptops?
No.
No?
No, you have
Everything could
local
be-
accounts on those machines that
Okay.
you can log into offline and use at home or anywhere else.
Because I know traditionally with all the PCs that I used before coming to NewTech, we had to log in, we had our username and password, and it was all routed through the admin building at district.
That will be when you're on the district network.
Okay.
And that just authenticates you on the network to give you access to resources on the network. Now, if you're in your car, you're using, you're tethered to your phone, or you have a MiFi device, you can connect up to the district and access resources through alternative means that we provided through web-based portals and other options. It's not going to be just like you're on the network, but certainly you can log into the computer and use it on any Wi-Fi that gets you access.
Okay, and that would not affect any of the programs that we might have pre-installed on it and anything like that?
No.
It would just be telling the network, hey, this is me, pretty
Yes,
much?
that's
Okay.
correct.
So that's not as bad as I was thinking it would be. As far as MacBook alternatives, you were talking about something that had similar specs to the MacBooks for a lot cheaper price. I know me personally, just from using the MacBooks, I've used both the older ones and the newer ones. The newer ones are amazing. The older ones worked really well too, especially whenever it came to like Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, any of the Adobe suite pretty much.
Right.
They were fantastic, and just the workflow of the MacBook, whether it's through the touch controls or anything like that, I feel is very fluid, and it helps with the workflow of whatever it is you may be doing. I personally would really only feel comfortable switching to a Windows computer if I had that same usability, I guess is the right word, because personally I use all of the touch controls all the time. I'm very big on multitasking with the MacBook, and I feel as if they're well suited to that. From my home computer, which is Windows, I have not felt the same, and that may just be because it's a desktop versus a laptop. But I would only personally really want to switch if I had that same usability. And I feel like a lot can be said for that. You have something to add?
Yeah, so in the terms of the workflow and everything, so you were talking about the Macs, and while the programs might become leveled out between the MacBooks and Windows, like more programs can run on both operating systems and run in both environments, I have noticed like what he's talking about, the workflow. Say, I use a Surface Pro 4, like I leave my MacBook at home, I just use my Surface here. But the workflow on it is very different. Like between the trackpad usage and everything, the MacBooks are much more fluid whenever it comes to working with all of our programs, especially in our learning environment. It helps speed things up, like stuff like searching through different Chrome and using databases and everything. I've noticed like the Mac user interface, it's much more fluid to go through everything on that than it is on something like a Windows machine.
I think that's a matter of preference. I've been an Apple fanboy since way back. I
But you
started
don't
out
use
on
it.
the Classic. So,
But you don't use it.
I use MacBooks too. I used my MacBook in the previous 2 years until I got my Surface this year. I've also used my dad's computer. That
So
he
do you
uses.
like the Surface? You like the Surface better than the Mac workflow then?
I like the workflow of the Mac better, actually.
okay, but you use both.
Yes.
And you like both,
Mhm.
obviously, for some,
Mhm.
and then that's a matter of personal preference.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get in the middle of that. What I would say is we need help with manageability and the ability to keep these MacBooks up and running
Mhm.
and avoid damage. We're asking for simple requests like the cases we provided. I'd like to see those cases on the MacBooks, especially if we're moving to MacBook Airs, if that's the decision for next year, then we definitely want those cases on there. And, you know, we provide those resources, but then I walk through the school and I see half the computers in no case. So part of this, the reason I'm here is, hey, let's work together to make good decisions and take care of the resources that the taxpayers provide for us. You guys are in a privileged position here in that you do have MacBooks and you do have one-to-one, and you can take those devices home. Our other schools don't have those privileges. So with those privileges come the extra responsibility of taking care of that equipment. And that's part of what we came here to try to ask you to do, is just help us keep that up by keeping those cases on. Another issue that we really need to find a way to address is the hacking of the admin account on the machines. Now, anybody with any computer savvy knows if you can get physical access to the device, you can get administrator access to the device. It does not mean you should do so. And in fact, we've had quite a few violations in that regard, but I have taken a hands-off approach in this first year of the change, and I've left it to Dr. Arbuckle. We've talked about a couple of extreme examples where learners have abused access to resources. And we've talked about just a simple example where an individual student uses the admin account. I view those in different lights. I defer to Dr. Arbuckle on the discipline for those measures or however he handles it up to a certain point. But when we see students abusing content, abusing the devices, repeatedly cracking that password, that's where our enforcement comes in as a technology team. And I don't like to do that because our options are much more limited than Dr. Arbuckle's. Ours include taking your computer away or not allowing you to take them home at night, things of that nature. And so we've not implemented those measures this year, but we need to get on board with each other and start acknowledging that there's room to give on both sides. And part of that is adhering to some of the restrictions that we provide, such as providing cases and asking you not to hack the admin accounts.
Well, and I think that goes back to, and that's I think that's a conversation for another day, since we're at 70 minutes at this point. But I think we're going to have to come, and to your point, we're going to have both sides come to the table a little bit, and when that feels difficult to do when we're saying, but it's got to be this way.
Well, the unfortunate
And
thing,
so-
Dr. Arbuckle, is, and I'm interrupting you in the interest of time, just to make that point clear, because you say, well, we have to do it because of this, as if that's not true. And the fact is, I've got the state IT security policy here. I've got an FCC reference on SIPA.
I looked at the same documents you did.
That's good. These young
And you and I
people do not.
are we're going to continue the conversation because we interpret them a little differently.
Okay.
And so,
Well, words are words, and so I brought some items to just read highlighted words from the very documents, if you'd like to do that. But if we've taken too much time in hashing over access to websites and we don't have time to do that now, then I can come back and do
yeah,
that.
I think that's the best thing in the interest of these guys' time and these guys' time. So one thing I will, because I told you I wanted to come back to where we started, and what this group, just because we couldn't get the projector to work for some reason, but what this group said was important to them when thinking about technology, the most often mentioned word, surprise, surprise, technology. Right? I know that's a big surprise. But slightly under that, engage, facilitate, research, learner, solve, learn, tool, skill, and world. So I think those, when you put all those together, I'll let you guys kind of to think about, how you use those terms. But I'm going to tell you that the smallest words on here were things like, there's lots of them, but assessment, let's see, blocking was kind of small, deep workflow was kind of small, pace problems, things like that. So, I think it's important to remember that, and I'm going to use a term that I'm going to steal from Dr. Berry a little bit. I've heard him say before, the primary role of the school and the district is learning and facilitating learning. And so I think that's what's important to remember as we continue to have these conversations is really we've got to keep learning in the forefront of our why we're doing what we're doing. So I want to tell you, I appreciate, this can be intimidating, right? You guys, 5 of you, and you've got all these adults sitting around the table, and so I really appreciate your willingness to come in and have your voice heard. Because I think that's really important. You guys know that's a key part of how we do business around here. And one of the reasons I record it all is because I don't want to have to worry about taking notes, and I want to go back and watch it again, right? That's my note taker right there. So I appreciate your willingness to come in and engage the adults in, the process and really have your needs kind of put out there from a learner perspective. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
And I appreciate you coming over, Dr. Berry. I appreciate you coming over and being part of this, and you guys taking time out of class. So we'll have to set another time, and it'll probably be another Friday because we've got a couple of kiddos who are in NWAC, and the only time they have off are Fridays.
That's fine. We'll work around
and
you.
so
Look forward to it.
we'll pick another Friday in the next few weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks, something like that, and come back and have some more conversation about this stuff. Okay?
I think your communication's great, and I think that you guys should know that we are not inaccessible. So if you have, it's wonderful to be able to answer questions that you've not had a feeling for how that works. And all of that's transparent on our part. It's just that we're too busy to communicate it sometimes. So you are always welcome to address Mr. Mays. His email is andy.mays.
Yeah, you can shoot me an email directly, ask me anything.
I'm debbie.skinner. So, feel free. One of the greatest things I think that we've done in the last few years has been the addition of the interns, because it really gives us another perspective too, which is what we really enjoy.
Yeah, which is a whole other topic we can put for a later meeting, where students have opportunities to come work with us and actually see what goes on behind the scenes. And that helps in many different ways. We won't go into the details now, but I'd love to discuss that with you as well.
So thanks, guys. I appreciate it. We're going to call this a day, and then I will send you guys some emails on possible other dates, okay?
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, Kylie.